I
Oh,
always grew up
really?
wanting to be a musician, and so I studied that for a while. And I went to this college in the UK where people do music, and I was surrounded by a lot of very talented musicians at all times, the other people doing the same courses as me. And what I discovered quite quickly, and then one day one of my friends said, could you build a website for our band? We're trying to promote it. And I was like, yeah. And they were like, how much do you charge? I'm like, you can charge for this? Interesting. Like $100? And they were like, yeah, sure. I was like, I'm rich.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Building Businesses on JavaScript podcast. For this one, I have John O'Nolan. I have been a big fan of John, and I can't believe he's here. And so I'm gonna let him introduce himself really quickly, and so we get right to it. So, how you doing, John?
I'm doing good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, for
John.
sure.
I'm the
Mm-hmm.
co-founder of Ghost, which is a decentralized open source publishing platform
Mm.
structured as a not-for-profit organization.
Awesome. So, I have this twist where I ask guests to tell me a fun fact right out the gate about you to sort of like an icebreaker to easing up a bit. So, fun fact. I've seen a lot of your interviews. I haven't heard a fun fact. I want to hear one about
Fun
John.
facts. Got me on
Hmm.
the spot now. Let's see.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of tattoos, but my first tattoo I got when I was 15 years old, living in the
Oh,
Philippines.
nice.
It's on my
Hmm.
back. I was convinced that I'd be able to successfully hide it from my parents, and just get away with it. And I managed that successfully for about an hour after getting home. At which point,
Oh my God.
my mum patted me on the back, and I went, "Ugh," and she went, "What did you do?"
Mm.
So I don't know why that one came to mind, but there you go. That's that's the
I
funnest
love
fact
it.
I've got today.
Yeah, it's always honest when it's like on the spot. I love it really. Anytime I think tattoos, I just think Prison Break. Have you seen the series?
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, I just think I don't know. It's let's have a little bit of origin story. Like, how did you get into like all this building on the web? Like early days, because of course you definitely were a builder. I've seen like you were on WordPress and everything. But let's just go like John O'Nolan's origin story, like the genesis of everything.
Well, it's kind of a bit of a sidetrack into the tech industry, really. I
Oh,
always grew up
really?
wanting to be a musician, and so I studied that for a while. And I went to this college in the UK where people do music, and I was surrounded by a lot of very talented musicians at all times, the other people doing the same courses as me. And what I discovered quite quickly, and to my detriment, was that I was not one of those very talented people. And as much as I tried to be very good, there were just simply lots of people around me who were much better, and even they weren't having very much success with music. So it kind of struck me that even if I was incredibly talented, my chances of succeeding and doing something with music in my career were going to be fairly low. But I had this side kind of hobby of making websites for bands I liked. Some of them early on were like fan sites. And then one day, one of my friends said, could you build a website for our band? We're trying to promote it. And I was like, yeah. And they were like, how much do you charge? I'm like, you can charge for this? Interesting. Like $100? And they were like, yeah, sure. I was like, I'm rich. This is incredible. And as like a penniless 19-year-old student, that felt like a huge amount of money. And I guess after a couple of years of realizing I was reasonably talented at that, it seemed like that had a little bit more prospects for income and being able to make a living than trying to become a average musician. So I kind of followed that path a little bit. I kept freelancing. I went and worked at agencies for a bit, and that sort of just grew over a number of years. And at one point, I tried to figure out how could I get bigger freelance clients? How could I be taken more seriously? And I decided, well, if I was a core contributor to WordPress and I had that reputation, that would look really good to my freelance clients. I could probably charge higher rates. So I decided to explore what it would be like to contribute to open source as a kind of designer and front end developer primarily. And what started as kind of a business decision opened me up to the world of open source and all the wonderful things about it. And I kind of bought into the dream of WordPress's philosophy of democratizing publishing. And really, that's kind of that's what led to everything else that came after.
Wow, that's amazing. That it's like you said, it's completely sidetracked. Like it wasn't like a direct path. You know what? Like most of us started with, oh, we like programming, we have programming interest, and then we dabble. But yours were, it's just random events that make sense. And I feel like I hear you so much on the average musician point, because I have big interest in music. Like I do envision being a film score composer someday, because I just like making film scores. And I've
Nice.
been an average musician for years. It's almost like a decade. I feel like I'm not as good as I should be, but I try. Like I play for my church and play all the stuff. And like there was this one time, someone who was, just showing me the stuff. He was like, "I'm not sure you would ever be good at this thing because you just suck so much."
Harsh.
Yeah, but it was really, I sucked so bad. But I just have like the passion for it, and I wanted to. So I think at my level of mastery right now is just sheer brute force. I like this. I'm just gonna put in that time. So when you spend so much time on something, you be decent, but you're not great. But you try, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but definitely not gonna be something that's gonna, because hey, I've not even found a way to make it a business up till like a decade, and I still not that good. So I definitely hear you on that stuff. And something you said, it's so this week I made a tweet and also a LinkedIn post, which is like, follow your interest, not your passion. Because from everything you said, you weren't really passionate about, you didn't even know you could make money from like building website, right? But sort of like it was interesting to you. Oh, they need a website. Interesting. I could build it for $100. And then the other interest was like, okay, how do I get more high-end clients? Well, if I be more notable in the WordPress space, I get more clients. So it's more like interest. And I could say that route has been really good for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I have quite a lot of passions. Music is one of
Yeah.
them. There are
Yeah.
many others, but most of them will probably not make good businesses for me. But there was clearly an opportunity in tech and in web design at the time. This was like 2007 or 8, maybe even before. But yeah.
Yeah, superb. I love that path. So I used WordPress before. I'm not a heavy WordPress user right now at all. I haven't been for like, more, maybe up to like maybe 5 years or more. I've been like all JavaScript and stuff. So
Mhm.
when I read, because we're getting into like Ghost, which is like I think is the biggest thing you're known for and what you've spoken about. I watched this Singapore fireside chat. You were brutally honest. I even did a screen grab of a section because it was just one point. I'm going to like go into all that in a bit. But
Sure.
yeah, so let's WordPress, right? Like in the early days, even up till now, WordPress is still dominating like the web dev space, especially for like, like I think it's the most way people get to build their CMSs and a lot of stuff, right? And I know like there's businesses that are like even unicorn on WordPress, like WP Engine, for example, which is like this hosting for WordPress. So at the time where you got into WordPress, was there any other alternative you would have used? And why did WordPress be like, okay, this is the thing, right? Because of course now we know that WordPress is ubiquitous, right? But back then there should be like a little bit of competitor, like something else to use. Why WordPress?
Yeah, I think the first version of WordPress I used was 2.3, which was pretty early in kind of WordPress's history. And the honest answer is because at the time, what I used and what we all used was just these little web hosting companies that had cPanel built in. And cPanel is this kind of admin system for hosting companies that was open source
Yeah.
that they'd all use. And it would come with these pre-defined applications that you could kind of one-click install. And WordPress was one of them. I think it was called Fantastico. I think it was Fantastico installer that was like part of PHP, the PHP packages that they had. And so I could get it up and running really easily. And before WordPress, I'd just been, FTPing into a directory on my server with HTML files and doing everything manually. I think I dabbled with PHP a little bit, but I was never a good enough backend programmer to do anything like heavyweight with it. But I could install WordPress, and once I could install WordPress, and I got a bit of help from a friend of mine who was working at the agency I was working at the time, the amount I could do as a front-end developer and designer suddenly expanded rapidly, because WordPress had all these simple PHP functions that even I could understand as a part of its theming layer, and I could build entire dynamic websites single-handedly. And that was kind of a revelation in terms of the scale and the scope of what I could do. And you could create new pages and new posts without needing to write any code. It was amazing. And at the time, I don't know if there were any like really popular alternatives. Joomla was around, Drupal was around, but they were much heavier. They weren't as easy to use, and blogging even back then was what I and a lot of other people were focused on. It was sort of pre-social media days, really.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like because I feel at the timeline, right? PHP WordPress was like just this easy entry. I also dabbled, like there was this semester back in school. So after the end of the semester, the only thing I wanted to do was learn PHP and Laravel, right? Like it was like everyone was going home to chill, but my mission for that summer was just master PHP and Laravel to build stuff, because it was so nice to use. Yeah, like that was what I really wanted back then. But of course now I'm all JavaScript and all. But it does make sense that you were able to pick up WordPress really easy. It's a little bit hard for me because I don't know, I have this thing with drag and drop systems and just this visual edit. I don't think I'm a good visual editing person. Even back in the days of Dreamweaver, everyone was like praising it, but for me, it was like, okay, I don't really think this is for me. Just click. I just don't know. It doesn't work. I like code for some weird reason, so I guess.
Yeah, and WordPress back then was all code. There was no drag and drop anything. We were
Yeah.
a long way from that,
Yeah, right. Yeah, like right now is the complete suite of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I have this so from your blog, when you introduced Ghost, you've been working on WordPress, like you were even head of UI design, right?
Deputy head of the UI
Yeah,
group.
deputy head of UI design. Yeah. So like tell me about that. Like what exactly do you do as a deputy head of UI design?
So WordPress always had lots of contributions from developers, obviously. Easy for them to get involved. They understand code. They understand SVN, versioning system that WordPress uses. But they didn't have a lot of contributions for designers. So at one point, I don't remember the year now, maybe 2008, around then, they set up a new working group, which is essentially just kind of a public community to get people together to talk about contributing to WordPress design. And around the time I started looking into contributing to WordPress was, I think, week 1 or week 2 of when this group had launched. So it was literally just 3 or 4 people getting together on IRC chat for a weekly meeting to talk about what the design goals for the next release of WordPress were. Is anyone available to help? Does anyone want to take on any design or front-end tasks? And I just started showing up week after week. All I did, I would show up to the meetings. I would ask how I could help. I would take on whatever tasks they would let me. And after doing that consistently for, I don't know, 6-12 months, the head of UI at the time asked me if I'd like to be the deputy head of the group and help, coordinate and organize everyone else who's doing it. So that group was responsible for shaping UI changes that would go into WordPress from a design point of view, having that go through review, and then ultimately implement for those of them that were able to contribute to code, implementing the front end as well.
Awesome stuff. It's like the famous saying, what you get for good work is more work. So I guess that
yeah.
Yeah, that really plays into it. But I feel it's more like the things with even in open source, like the more in any open source, right? Like I became the lead maintainer of Sales.js, which is like
I saw that.
Node.
Congrats.
Yeah, like yeah. So it's almost like the same story. I was just I was like the loudest person talking about sales and everything. And just from there, the Mike McNeil who made sales were like, you know what? I think you should be the official face of sales. And it was like, oh yeah, more work. The reward for good work is more work.
That's
And
right.
it's been amazing. So yeah, I want to segue, right? Because I have a lot of counterpoints here. So I read your masterpiece. I call it a masterpiece because it was so beautiful written and thought through. Which is the ghost.onolan.org, which is like your blog talking about the idea of Ghost. And the only other time I've seen writing like this was Nathan Berry of ConvertKit. It was so good, right?
Thank you,
So
man.
detailed. Like it's, I like good writing. I love to read. So when I see great writing, I really appreciate your humor, your everything. I was like, this is amazing. So, and one thing that caught my attention was that you made something that is supposed to be seen as a positive light as a plea to do less. Which is WordPress is so much more than just a blogging platform. That's a good thing. We could do anything, just like Notion, right? Build whatever you want. But there's this thing which is there are riches in niches, which is like not everybody wants all that much. And when you focus on too much, you sort of like paint with too much broad stroke. The details that make it good for certain type of people will no longer be there, or it will be there, but not, it will just be average because, of course, it's not like your core focus. So that was masterful, like turning that light, like WordPress is more than just a blogging platform, to like a negative, not really like a negative, but like niching. We don't want you to be more than a blogging platform. We want a blogging platform WordPress, which is what we needed you to be. Like, so just talk to me about what was going through your head when you wrote that, because like I said, it's a masterpiece. I read the entire thing in one sitting. I was just so engaged. I was like, oh wow, this is good. And you painted your vision of the WordPress fork. I didn't even know Ghost was like a WordPress fork and that Ghost was open source, because I just knew Ghost.org as a platform that my other company, which I was on, used. So yeah, so what was going through your mind? I want you to go back to the way you were typing all those and just tell me. I want to know that.
Yeah. So the primary versions of WordPress that I was contributing to was kind of, let's see, I think it was 2.8 or 2.9 through to like 3.1 or 3.2, that kind of range of time. And it was exactly around the time. So 3.0 was a big release for WordPress. They shifted from just having posts and pages to having posts, pages, and then custom post types. So you could kind of define custom content types and taxonomies, which would take WordPress from, being quote unquote limited by posts and pages to being able to have products or listings or directories, or you could kind of structure any data type that you wanted. And this is largely driven by demand. The internet and the web was growing quickly. People were trying to make, all these different types of businesses online. And WordPress was kind of one of the best user interfaces, one of the best products around for easily spinning these things up. And adding these capabilities allowed people to do so much more with it. And this was before there were kind of big players in most of the big niches or spaces or market sectors that would come along later. And it was good. It made sense for them, but it really shifted the focus over the next couple of years. WordPress went from having a relatively clear focus of kind of publishing and to a lesser extent website building to competing with a lot of funded companies that were all doing things at the same time. So WordPress was trying to do e-commerce to compete with Shopify, and it was trying to do better website building to compete with Squarespace. And then it was trying to do microblogging to compete with Tumblr. And it was trying to do blogging to compete with Blogger and then later Medium. And these things started adding up, and the focus felt like it was everywhere but publishing. It was everywhere but what WordPress had started out as, which was a publishing platform. So I had this niggling idea in the back of my head of, what if you hit reset? What if you took away some of the kind of old craft of the legacy of WordPress code, of which there was a lot, and refocused it on just one core use case, just publishing. And for the longest time, the idea sat in my head because I thought it was not a good idea. Even in, I think, 2012, this was the idea of another blogging platform was like, oh God, please, not another one. There's so many. not another one. And everyone who I kind of talked to about it privately was like, yeah, it's a terrible idea, don't do it. But the idea wouldn't go away, and it just kept coming up. So eventually I wrote this blog post. It's like, here's my idea for what a fork of WordPress might look like if you started over. And it was called Ghost. And it kind of laid out how I'd make it simpler and how I'd make it more focused on the writing experience and publishing and not all the other things. And it didn't end up being a fork of WordPress because that many wise people informed me would be a terrible idea. So we ended up using Node.js instead. But the idea took off, and that blog post went relatively viral. It got 30,000 people signing up with email addresses to hear if I ever worked on it. Hit that front page of Hacker News, and got more tweets than I've ever had in my whole life. So I knew that there was something there worth spending a bit more time on, because I'd certainly never had a reaction like that to anything else I'd worked on.
Amazing. So you said you asked a couple of people and they were like, that's not a great idea. So I just, because again, I've been doing a lot of research, and from your Singapore fireside chat idea, the only idea you have good positive feedback on is an average idea, right? And the two other one is a really stupid idea and they tell you stupid, or it's a great idea and they still tell you stupid, right? Because it's
Yeah.
so I have this rule, which is I I'm a little bit skeptical of people with a lot of experience when it comes to making decisions, because experience could be a liability, right? Because let's say you're it's like I'm always scared of, like, so as much as I learn, I try to always go with my gut, because from what's popular, the knowledge that's out there, what's, when you like a thought leader, like you have all this analysis, you have all the stats. Making Ghost didn't make any sense because, of course, there were other alternatives, right? But it's kind of like was an interest of yours. You just have like this gut feeling, like I think there should be something here. It doesn't make any sense in my mind, right? Or even other people be like, this is stupid because why would you want to do this? So I'm always skeptical of experience, because anytime I get advice, be like, okay, is it coming from a place of experience? And if it is, I try to like question experience, because experience might be good, but most times I see it as liability, because if it didn't work before in another light, that doesn't mean it wouldn't work. And sometimes what make an idea work is the person. And if you had come and be like, Ghost would be 100%, like for profit, I need VC funding, it might not have kicked the same way it did with the Kickstarter and everything. But your approach and your mix with the idea sort of like made it this unique thing that if you separate them, like yourself and the idea, it might not have really done anything really great. But the combination of it all was unique enough to like make Ghost this amazing thing it is today. So like that's just my own experience and advices.
Yeah, I think you
What do you
definitely
think?
need to have a beginner's mind to some extent. And you have to be
Yeah.
a little naive to think it's going to be easy. How hard could it be in order to just try some of these things in the first place? If I had known today all of the challenges and pains along the way of how hard it really was going to be, I don't know if I would have done it. And that's kind of a common thing that I've heard lots of people say. So the naivety, the lack of experience, in some ways is definitely a benefit. But the longer you work on something, the more the experience becomes valuable. The beginner's mindset is really the most valuable at the beginning, and then its utility diminishes over time as a code base matures and grows and has more users and more customers. The value of experience goes up dramatically in knowing how to solve problems right. Because if you don't know how to solve them right, you often end up solving them multiple times, and that's incredibly tiring and frustrating. So there's value in both, I think, and maybe you need a little bit of both.
Yeah, so back to the old being naive at the beginning and then experience and competence taking place. I was so it sounds like the old bumblebee thing, which is like according to the laws of aerodynamics, the bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly. because of his massive body and tiny wings. But we are the ones with the experience and all the science. The bumblebee doesn't know. It's just, okay, I have a wing. I have wings. I should be able to fly and just fly anyhow. So I feel like that's kind of like mindset for early stage girls getting the idea, because the ideas that change the world are very, very. I think they sound stupid if you just say it, right? Like even when like what one idea that changed my life was picking sales over everything out there. It wasn't popular. There was no incentive in terms of job market. It was like literally people thought of it as dead and old. But I was interested. I was like, hey, this thing feels like lava to me. Why don't I just follow this interest and see what lies? And that like has paid me the most money I've made online by just following that idea, that stupid idea to like use something that people deem dead. So I feel like, that's got that naive, okay, well, let's just see what's happening. I don't know. So the thing about interest I've seen, right? It's gonna be just egging at you, right? You just at the back of your mind, you feel like if you don't do this, you probably won't be able to rest with the idea. It always keep coming back, right? It's just like I don't know if it's intuition or this. It just keeps coming back. It doesn't sound good to your mind or your experience, but it just keeps egging at you. And those are the kind of thing that I just use in basing a sort of like the interest I want to pursue. It just that again, like it just keeps coming back and just like you should try this, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was one of those for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So cool. So brilliant story on like so you mentioned that you didn't think of how hard I'm so glad you did not do all the math and all the analysis of how hard it's going to be to build a blog focused WordPress fork. Um but what are those challenges? Because I saw so I was watching your lemon squeezy interview, right? And one thing you mentioned was like the folks in the Rails and Lava world. I love those people. Like my two most favorite people again, DHH, Taylor Otwell. I think I've studied them all through my careers. They are like two of my favorite makers ever. All right. And I feel you going with Node.js is kind of interesting because I don't see where that came from because PHP background, WordPress background, even on the blog, you're like this platform is going to like the marketing page, I guess, going to be on WordPress and all that. And then Node, why? How? What happened?
Yeah, it was a controversial decision at the time,
Mhm.
but that kind of helped us, and that was part of the reason for making it. What you have to understand is in 2012, did we decide in 2012? Was it early 2013? It might have been early 2013. In any event, Node was at version 0.10.
Wow.
It was just this like hot new thing that wasn't really fully baked yet, but that a lot of people were talking about. It was quite trendy. And I was working with a friend of mine called Rob in the UK, and we were kind of messing around with ideas for the Ghost editor. And he sort of threw together an editor running on Node as a backend to save whatever you put into the editor. And he was like, "You could just run the whole thing on JavaScript." And I said, "Could we?" And then I talked to Hannah, who ended up being the co-founder of Ghost, about this, and she said, "I'm basically a JavaScript developer now." Quite coincidentally, because in her day job she was kind of not writing PHP anymore. She was mostly writing JavaScript, and so we pitched the idea in the Kickstarter of we're building this and we're building it with Node.js, and because we're doing that, it's fast. It's really fast. In fact, it's 20 times faster than WordPress. And new technologies are a blessing and a curse. They're a blessing because people take more interest. If we'd said, here's another blogging platform in PHP, everyone, would say, "Oh, another one," just like the 10 or 15
Yeah.
or 20 others that have launched in the last year. But doing it on Node.js and being able to kind of show off some of the benefits of Node.js, in most cases, just the insane speed of it, made it more interesting to people, made it catch on, certainly made the Hacker News crowd take some interest. But the curse, the other side of the same coin, is that new technologies are not stable. They don't have large ecosystems. They don't have history. They don't have packages that have been developed over many years and standards that have come into place from companies using them. So The example I always give is that when Ghost started using Node, there wasn't even an RSS package in npm, and over the years, we kind of ended up writing almost all of our own dependencies. And with hindsight, that was one of the biggest strategic disadvantages of choosing Node. If we had chosen, Rails, or perhaps a little bit later in time Laravel, we would have benefited enormously from those ecosystems, particularly because so many other people were building web applications with Rails and Laravel, that the types of things people were building were leading to these great open source packages that you could benefit from and use, and know that that piece of your code base is being maintained by someone else and is probably improving without you having to do anything. But in Node, not only did we have to write all of our own dependencies, for the most part, not every single one, but people really weren't using Node to build web applications. They were using it to build APIs, and they were using it to build microservices, and they're using it to build architectures which were not monoliths, and Ghost is a monolith. So we chose a tool that was very unsuited to the job in many ways. And, a decade later, it's now becoming a bit more popular to build web applications in Node. There's more ways of doing things. There's more tooling. There's more frameworks. There's more packages that we can benefit from. But it was an uphill struggle. So it was, I still don't know if it was a good decision. If you were to go back and replay history again and, choose the other path, I don't know if it would have worked out better or worse. I could see it kind of going either way. But it was a little bit of a harebrained choice. That one worked out. There were others that didn't work out as well.
Yeah, it was an interesting gamble. I don't think I would have though at a minor version as 0.10. And can you still hear me?
Say that again one more time. Sorry.
Yeah, like I'm not sure I would have picked Node at that early in the game, 0.10,
Yeah.
but I feel it's another gut decision, which I think I'm grateful for because your work, the open source things you've done. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the open source things you've done at Ghost has been inspiring for me. Most importantly, Bree, because I feel like Ryan Dow gave us a gift that was supposed to give us an unfair advantage in full stack web development. But for some reason, it's not the sentiment of the ecosystem. The ecosystem is more focused on where JavaScript was birthed, which is on the front end. So I feel like that's why full stack web development in JavaScript will still always have this little cultural differences because coming from the days of PHP and everything, like we do understand like web dev from a server-centric point of view. A JavaScript developer that started learning JavaScript from the client will struggle. And that's why the most of the frameworks are UI frameworks. And we have this new types of frameworks called meta frameworks, which is like I don't even know the in between the back end. So there's no full holistic solution. I searched for it. That's why like I picked sales. Sales is over the years, anytime I dabble on, because I have another show called Teach Kevin Your Thing, where I like learn this massive other frameworks from different people in the JavaScript ecosystem. And even though theirs are more newer and a lot, but sales just it's sort of like it gives you this complete story. Like if you want to build a full stack web app, it will work. We have everything, the ORM, like typically databases are always outsourced in the JavaScript land. Okay, go use Superbase, go use this other database as a service. But I just want a database in my app. I want a good ORM. Let's pick one. No, use Prisma, use something else. So it's a pain. It was the same pain I saw with Express, why I had to look for it because like the time I picked JavaScript for the backend, Express was very popular. It's still very popular, but you have to piece everything together. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to make those choices. I just want Laravel. Like everything just comes and I just use it. I like convention because the JavaScript folks will tell you that it's good to be flexible, but I don't think it's good. I think it makes you just do the unnecessary work, the busy work. Like, give me a convention that it's good enough that I agree with, and let me just build. All right. But so I feel that is a little bit of our disadvantage, and I'm hoping to see like the full stack story be more even successful It's why like I actually started this whole movement of the boring JavaScript stack, which is like I'm so tired of all the exciting. It's so exciting, but we're not building anything like the Rails guys are building, the Lava guys are building. It's so much fun when you watch their conferences. But here it's always like, the new state management, the new how to make things more performant on the DOM. But that is not the app we're building. That's not products. That's just like you're going too much into the details and you're losing the builders, because builders like I've seen projects left things like Next.js, for example, and go back to Laravel or go back to Rails. Why? It's because of that whole picture. The full picture is missing. And like I just hope we could really really lean on that unfair advantage, which is JavaScript is a beautiful language, and now it's in the back end and the front end. We should just build stuff with it, right?
Yeah, agreed. I've definitely experienced all the same things.
Yeah. So yeah. Now I have this question for you because there's this thing about when you launch Ghost, you said it's not for profit. I think, how do you define a not for profit? Because I don't think I understand it, right? Because I've heard non-profit. I don't know if it's the same thing. Then not for profit. Is it the same in the
It's,
context?
yeah, those
It-
two words are synonymous. Yeah.
okay, cool. So like, how does it? What are the mechanics? Because it's a new thing for a startup to be not for profit. Because like, how does it differ from I'm in business to make profit? And how does it work? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, so the word nonprofit can be, well, it just is incredibly confusing, in part because it's not a very good phrase, and in part because it actually means different things in different countries. And the words aren't always the same depending on which country you're referring to. But the most important thing that essentially all nonprofits have in common, regardless of what country you're talking about, is that nobody owns them. There are no shareholders. So I don't own Ghost. Hannah, my co-founder, doesn't own Ghost. We are only trustees. And a trustee has the decision-making power of a shareholder to steer the company and decide what it should do, but does not have any ownership stake in it. So there is
Mm,
no ability for us to raise funding, because when you raise funding, you sell shares. I don't own any shares. And there's no ability for the business to be bought or sold, because the way a business is bought and sold is to buy or sell the shares. So without shares, an entity, a business, is independent. It is on its own 2 feet. It's not owned. It is only controlled by the trustees who are working for it. And so that independence gives you this long-term perspective. If you have this business that can never be bought or sold, you're kind of stuck with it. And the idea of starting a company that could pay me a great salary, but that I didn't need to attach to this ambition of one day I want to sell it for $1 billion, was very interesting to me. Like, how would that change the product decisions that you make? Because so often, and I saw this on the inside in WordPress, product decisions get made because companies are eyeing an acquisition, or they're eyeing a partnership, or they're eyeing another round of venture capital. And so they're adding things to the product or making critical product decisions, not with the interests of the user in mind, but with the strategic interests of the company in mind, often at the detriment of the user, because they're trying to increase their valuation or increase their sale price in some capacity. And so the idea of taking that away, taking that kind of backroom negotiation, the kind of under the table dealings away from product decisions, was just a fascinating one to me. And I didn't really feel, and this may be just a me thing, and I certainly don't think everyone should think this way, but I'm very happy making a great salary and getting to work on what I love. I don't really want to sell it anyway, and I don't really want to have some giant exit for hundreds of millions of dollars. That isn't what the idea of that doesn't fill me with excitement. Does it seem like it would be fun for a bit, buy a Ferrari or whatever? Sure, that would be fun for a bit. But I think after the fun wears off, I'd be bored. And the freedom that I have from not needing to pursue that goal, I can still have a great salary. I can work on whatever I want with people I like and optimize everything entirely around our users and customers. I like that a lot more. I value that a lot more than the idea of, this mythical startup lottery exit, which has about the same odds as playing the lottery. So the reasoning and the structure felt like they made perfect sense alongside open source. And open source tries to be independent. It tries to do things for its users. And typically, what you want from an open source project, certainly what I want from an open source project, is be able to trust the people behind it, not one of these rug pull open source projects that suddenly turns into a startup that is trying to sell you triangles or otherwise.
Oh my. I think what you just described is what an ideal business should be, right? Because it's how I think about the businesses I'm building. Like, I don't want VC. I don't want someone to buy because I like working on this stuff. I just want it to be able to afford me my lifestyle so I could, make enough money to affect the things I care about. And salaries could do that. Like, revenue you earn could do that if you, of course, do as every prudent business does by keeping costs low. You should be able to afford to like make a good living and not, wishful. I think this is what a business is. Like, you just define a business, but it's interesting why it's not popular and why is the third naive thing naive thing you would like you did, which is Ghost, a niche down WordPress using Node earliest version, and now like three times, like you just you were making it easy for yourself, but
Oh
it
yeah,
didn't
no.
work out.
We flipped every switch to hard mode, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
like
And
you were
there's
making it
another one.
easy.
There's another one in there
Oh,
which we had a fully remote team. In 2012. There was not many of those back then. It was like Buffer and Automatic, and I think it was Basecamp. I guess Basecamp's always been remote, but it wasn't
yeah,
popular. It was a long time before COVID,
yeah.
and that is team building on hard mode, as we've learned over the years and had to kind of get good at or get good at
Mm,
working around. But yeah, with
mm,
hindsight, I probably wouldn't have stacked quite so many additional challenges altogether. I think it was quite a lot, but there's something special about the combination of them at the same time. The nonprofit and the open source fit together in a really unique way.
mm,
Node as a starting point gave us leverage in a really unique way, and all of that uh, gave people a story of Ghost that caught their interest. And when you start a new thing, a new project, a new business, whatever, one of the hardest things is catching people's interest. Whether your thing is really good or not really good, it's are people going to be interested or not? There's a lot of indie hackers that are just building products that are probably good, probably really useful, but they don't have an angle that can catch people's interest enough, and so they really struggle with distribution. They really struggle with just getting that initial foothold. And for better or for worse, we did a good job of that, and that certainly helped get us off the ground.
mm. Amazing. Okay, so now four things not on your. So it's as if you picked four lemons and you made an amazing lemonade. That's what I'm just. That's
I
what I'm
like it.
just gonna. Yeah, it's amazing. So, like, so I'm currently reading the book Slow Productivity by Carl Newport, and one of the things that kept me like I saw those two phrases and I just left the book for like a week because it was just food for thoughts for that long. Which is, if you're going to make something that is going to be like an alternative to what already exists, it has to be two things: enjoyable and life affirming. And when I think about, because today everyone is trying to be an indie hacker to like to make it work, and even in my businesses and even in open source, right? If you look at the tools that kick off, it's both. Like the whole reason why we were excited about Node, like when like in the demo, was it was really enjoyable. Like this language we all know that runs on the client, someone found a way to take V8 and do a little things to it, and now it runs outside the browser. That's going to be enjoyable to use because I like writing JavaScript. And now the life affirming part of it is that, hey, it's going to be easy to build a lot of things now because of the event loop and the performance and all. And I just feel like those two combination is what every business or every venture needs, like to really get people interest. I have to enjoy it. Like it's just the same way where, like if you give a kid an apple and chocolate, even though the apple is good, they won't be like, no, I want chocolate, because chocolate is more enjoyable. Like, but apple is good for you, right? But chocolate is sweet. I like it. I like eating chocolate, but apple not so much. So I just feel like you just have to have those two when you're doing anything to like get people to like really want to get on it.
Chocolate covered apple, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's interesting. You gotta have like this coating or this cover that is like enjoyable, and then of course, okay, you could, yeah, but it's an art to really get like to that point. And a few people I've seen do it really well. It's like Taylor Otwell, even Tailwind CSS. Like, do you know
Yeah.
the tool?
Yeah. Adam's a good friend.
It's it's mind blowing what he was able to do with that. Right?
Yeah.
Like that wasn't the first attempt at utility classes. Like if you go back in history, people have tried different versions. But why
Yeah.
did Adam still with CSS work? It was really enjoyable to see him use it and build stuff with it. And it felt like this contrast with the behemoth of CSS files we could have, Tailwind was like the better option because it was just so enjoyable to use. And I will always tell people Tailwind sort of like changed how I style. I can't remember styling outside Tailwind anymore because why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
Right?
Same.
He nailed it. Like superb. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
A lot of people think Adam doesn't like CSS. For people who don't pay a lot of attention to Tailwind, assume that that's the motivation behind it. But Adam knows more about the depths and the inner workings of CSS and likes the inner workings of CSS more than anyone I've ever met. To this day, even as recently as a month ago, he was teaching me new CSS properties that I didn't know existed. And it's leaning on that love of CSS and knowledge of CSS that is what allowed him to create this layer of Tailwind that is so useful. I think all the ones that came before, they had the idea of utility classes, but they maybe didn't have the same level of depth in how those utility classes were going to play out in how they were used and applied. And as Tailwind's evolved, it's just gotten more and more useful. And like you say, it's difficult now to imagine going back to writing CSS in a different file for me, certainly. There's
Yeah.
the odd case with an animation or something where I might, if I'm too lazy to define, a new helper, then I might go and write some manual CSS. But for the most part, all Tailwind.
Yeah. And it just played into the future. Like it's so rare to see an idea that can be so good in the future. Like even with our AI driven world, you could see where people are pairing code generation tools by AI with Tailwind, because the DSL, of course, because before Tailwind you just want to do .css file. So how is it going to work? You're going to do the markup and then you .css file. But that ease and that one mental model of the design and the markup in one place, I think Adam really nailed it. And it's I feel if I ever change I will style on web dev, and props to him for that. Really, like it's very trivial. Like it's a simple idea, it's a stupid idea. In fact, it wasn't an idea he was going to pursue, but it's brilliant. It was brilliantly executed. Like the marketing, showing us how it could be used. Like most sites, anytime I view their elements, inspect, I always see Tailwind there these days.
Yeah.
Like both from
Same.
big businesses, small. It's just like, why won't you use it? It's so good. It's so good. So yeah, so that's enough nerding on Tailwind. So um I've let's talk about duality a little bit, right? Because I feel you are an indie hacker at heart, you're an open source person, and there's always been this duality I've seen. And so I did this it's org, which is African Indie Hackers, which is encouraging more people to want to build businesses online as opposed to like, getting a 9 to 5. It's good, but I feel most people don't really know that something like this exists and for them to try it. And one thing I've seen, the question, should I be bootstrap or should I be VC funded? And at the start, I was very dogmatic because I've seen how startups they sort of like drop the ball by out of the gate going for funding, and they don't really know what they were building. It's so now the funding comes again, the experience, right? Just disrupt the idea, and now the idea doesn't hold water. Before you know, they've bankrupt or they're fucked up. They've pivot. So I've always been like, you know what? If you're going to start a business, you should start bootstrap and then see how much you could do with what you have. Then if you need money in the future, you should get it. That's been my idea. But I think I'm a little bit more lenient with it because I feel like not every businesses have the ability to function that way. There are some ideas that are really huge. You sort of
Yeah.
like need VC fund out of the gate. So I'm more lenient. I'm like, I feel we don't have to have this duality, this either X or Y. It's just the same thing in software development. It depends, right? Is that how you think about it too?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh.
I think bootstrapping is great for lots of things. You're obviously not going to build SpaceX or Tesla with bootstrapping. When you have physical products and a production pipeline and factories and rockets, it's gonna cost some money. It's gonna cost some money to do those things. Bootstrapping, though, I think can be applied to a lot more software companies and projects than it probably is. There's a lot of very silly tech companies that raise a ton of money to build a Rails app. You don't need to raise money to build a Rails app. You might get to a point where you need to scale a business and you need infrastructure to support a Rails app. You can't run Shopify with no funding either, most likely. But to get off the ground, to launch, you don't need funding for most SaaS apps or think the types of things that we do in the indie hacker space. But I agree. Yeah, it's different approaches for different types of business.
Yeah, true. And why being um lenient about it, I definitely agree with you. Like most of the ideas that come, like because like there's this Discord I run where I get a lot of people that come with the ideas. They'll be like, "Oh, I need funding. I need to hire a team." I'm like, "Why? You don't even have anything concrete. Why do you need a team? Like, try and you are a developer, right? Yeah, learn enough to get like something that people could use out the door to even see if it's useful." So like, I feel like people, I don't know whether it's Silicon Valley mindset because people feel they just want to scale. And anytime I hear the word scale from someone who just started a startup, I try to keep my stuff together because I'll be like, how do you do it? Because the most common path for any business is failure. Like that's the most common path. Like, how do you know you're gonna need scale? Why don't you just build with what you know? They'll be like, oh, this stuff doesn't scale. That you might not even be lucky enough to get to that point. Why are you thinking that far? Just get something that people would use today. Then if you have a scaling problem, it's a good problem to have, right? Like everyone wants a scaling problem. So why is that like why is that a why is that a negative instead of a plus? That if I have a scaling problem, yes, I could hire people then to like scale this thing to serve people. But I feel like there's so much premature hammering at scaling at this should be performance, this should be this. Like just build stuff. One case in point, like um Stack Overflow is still a monolith. The last time I checked, like this thing that we all use, it's still a monolith. But when you see new startups, be like, okay, I got to go serverless. I got to like, dude, just build the stuff with what you know already. If you could even be a Google form, make it a Google form. Just give the value.
Yeah, I agree. I think developers get caught up in trying to use best practices, which is, by all accounts, a good thing, and procrastinating on doing non-code. Right? It's easier to continue to do code than to go and send 10 tweets. So sometimes what your business needs is for you to go and write 10 tweets and schedule them.
Yeah.
And there's, it's the tired old indie hacker meme of the number of things you'll do instead of marketing. There's
Yeah.
definitely some of that.
Yeah. So that's that's gonna lead me up to like a next line because anytime I speak to indie hackers, especially developers oriented indie hackers, like I call them, where I feel developers don't make good business people if you have completely on your developer mind because you are so in the detail of building the thing, not if it's going to be worth building, and how to build it in a way that is worth selling, right? So, like, how do you get Ghost to be this popular to like making your like 7M every year, right? Like, that's the value add.
Yeah, good question. I think with all of these things, there's always a lot of luck involved in terms of timing in particular. I think Ghost managed to hit this kind of renaissance or like revival of people's interest in blogging that was happening around sort of 2012, 2013. At that point, they come up every few years, it seems like. We go through cycles of these things. So the timing was good. And I think the experience of having worked in WordPress and web design for multiple years, maybe like 5 or 6 years before Trying Ghost, gave me enough insights to sort of see the things that did work, see the things that didn't work, and from that synthesize, a new idea. And the idea of the business model was, what if you had the product of WordPress, but you had the business model of WP Engine? Because then one could fund the other and it would all make a lot of sense. It seemed very weird to me that, we were all building WordPress sites and giving our money to WP Engine, but WP Engine doesn't make WordPress. It's just a hosting business, a great hosting business, but a hosting business nonetheless. And nobody wanted to use WordPress.com because that was like this handicapped, limited version of WordPress that didn't let you have plugins, didn't let you have themes. It was entirely stupid. So why not take the two good things, the open source product that's flexible and powerful, and a managed hosting platform that would solve the server issues, and just make those easy. So the idea was just to combine two things that I'd already seen that existed, and that business model worked. That was something that was a theory. We weren't 100% sure if a managed hosting platform funding an open source project in 2012 was going to be a thing that worked out. But here 11 years later, so far so good.
That's the 5th lemon. More lemons, I like. No, it's I think it,
building a hosting platform from scratch. Actually, you're right. That is it's a
yeah,
lemon.
like you just stacking the odds against you. I think we should call this the all the odds against John and Ghost or something, because it was a lot. Like there were a lot of like downsides out the gate, but you made it work. That's awesome. So, like, one thing I've seen that I think is on a decline because of the rise of short form video content, right? Like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. Do you think it's sort of like reducing the amount of people that read long form written content? Because I love long form written content, but your piece, your article, I know a couple of people, I will send them to, I'll be like, oh, this is too long. Can you just tell me the gist of it? People just they like someone told me like most people these days have a TikTok brain, which is like a 30 seconds. Like, just give me the 30-second version of it, and no one wants to read long form content. And it's why I see something like what Gergely of the Pragmatic Engineer is doing. I don't know if you know it, right? It's amazing work. Like, it just like you, Lemons. In a world where everyone was short form content, Gergely was like, no, I'm going to give you a very long one. You're going to pay me to do it. And it's making good living from doing that. Like, so do you think or have you seen, because of course you should see this because you work on the blogging space, like, is there like a decline in people reading long form content?
I don't know if there is. We don't, because Ghost is decentralized, we don't have, data on this or anything. But my sense of, knowing our users and our customers and seeing my own experience of the web is that certainly, yes, video is really taking over in terms of what's most popular. But that doesn't, I don't think it's going to replace long form writing. The evolution of mediums over the years has always sort of favored the thing that is the most colorful and the most attention grabbing, whether that was newspaper followed by radio, followed by TV, followed by internet text, followed by internet video. or photos than videos. There's this constant kind of evolution to the more engaging thing as the most popular, and that's fine. But books have been around for a long time, and articles have been around for a long time, and I don't think they're going anywhere. They might not be the most popular medium forever, but Ghost supports multiple types of content as well. It's not purely
Mhm.
writing. You can have video content in Ghost. You can have photos. At some
Nice.
point, maybe we'll all be wearing Apple headsets covering our faces, and then we'll have to figure out if text is like a good reading experience in there. But no, I think the internet's always evolving, but the web is fundamentally text-based, and text is probably always going to have a home at the heart of everything that we do, because it's what's in a database. If other than AI vector databases, what's in a database is largely text, and I think that underpinning is probably going to continue for some time until AGI eats us, and then who knows what will happen.
For sure. I hear you on that one. Like even up to today, if I have the option of having like just books, like the ebook version and the physical one, I always go for the physical one. There's just this thing about having a physical book and just diving into it and just getting the full long form content. It's of course it might just be like the sentiment, right? Because who are those, like, what is it, 30,000-40,000 people that are paying Gege for the, like, his newsletter, like that very long form detailed research? There's always going to be like these people like prefer depth over, like, just give me the gist. Because of course the gist, it's easy for it to go viral because of course it's very short. So I just, scroll and I get to it and I get there. But if you really want to, deep experience and just soak in more knowledge, you will definitely need long form content. And is it's kind of interesting because a friend of mine, Aaron Francis, he has this habit of printing the docs. I don't know if you know him. It
I know
just
Aaron,
goes
yeah.
like, yeah, he print the docs out and just go read, and then it'll come to all those viral YouTube videos, right? From what was already on the docs, but he was the one that was able to go that distance to like read the long form content, and now it make it easy for the people who don't want to read the long form content. It's amazing.
He has
It's
a real
amazing.
talent for doing it well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Like it's amazing to watch him work and those stuff. So yeah, we're gonna be wrapping up a little bit. This has been fun. I really want us to keep on going, but of course. So let's nerd out a little bit on two things, and then we're gonna do the fun questions, which I always like because they are all laid back. So the first thing is you've built a lot of open source components for full stack JavaScript, your needs at Ghost. Do you want to talk a little bit about them?
Sure. Let's see. Probably the two that come to mind are the SQLite 3 bindings for Node. We didn't actually write. Who was it? Map. One of the mapping software companies. They wrote it, but eventually they didn't want to take over. They didn't want to continue maintaining it. So we're now the maintainers of Node SQLite 3, which is downloaded a ridiculous number of times per day.
Wow.
I want to say it's in the like hundreds of millions per month. Much more than Ghost. It's quite funny, but that's a good example again of us having to be the maintainer of our own dependencies. So we monitor and help steward that one quite a lot. The one that we haven't done as much as I would like to with yet is actually our editor. So we have a rich text editor in Ghost, and we call it the Koenig editor. And it's based on lexical.js, which is developed by Meta or Facebook. It's what powers every single text input editor fields that you see on Instagram or Facebook or WhatsApp, literally all of it. That's lexical. And they kind of built lexical to be the React of editor frameworks. It's a small team at Meta, but they've built something pretty compelling in terms of an editor framework, and we've built on top of that to build a rich text editing experience that sort of feels like a cross between Medium and Dropbox Paper and Notion, the usual suspects. But what we'd like to do is break that out into its own project so that other people can use that editor in other places. If someone else is making a writing platform of some sort, they could just use our editor, or a desktop writing app, or some other app that needs a great editor for long form writing, maybe they could just take that off the shelf. TipTap's done a great job with that, obviously. Maybe we could do something with that as well. But at the moment, it's we just haven't pulled it out enough to really be useful as a standalone project. So there's a little bit more work to do there. Not very much, but I think we're going to try and do that at some point.
Yeah, please, because I did send out a tweet on like, what do you all use for rich editing experience? Because I know Basecamp have theirs. I've looked at it a little bit, but I'm still in the market for one because I'm working on. So I have this naive idea of building 50 complete products, make it a course, and also give out the code base. And the first one I'm working on is called Event Captain. It's like this self-hostable full event platform with a little bit of nuance because I get to use it myself. So it's like events meets a speaker platform all in one, but you get the code. It's built with this borrowing stack and you just use it for yourself. So I was looking for like a rich text for the description so that you could have rich description, with all the formatting and all with images. So definitely I would really love for you all to polish it and release it so we could try it out. So I checked out NoSQL like 3. I didn't know you all were the maintainers of this. That means Ghost is completely on SQLite. Is that right?
It's both SQLite and MySQL 8. We used to support SQLite in production, but then as we started moving to like much larger sites with memberships and subscriptions and payments, and database became a little more heavy, we kind of moved to just MySQL 8 in production as our recommended and fully tested stack. But yeah, we still maintain the SQLite.
That's amazing. I think everyone will be pleased to know that. I would definitely check out SQLite. I'm really glad you all use it. So since we're on tech stack, do you want to go a little bit in, because I know your stack may or may not have changed. If you're boring like me, you still stay with your original Node.js stack. Is there now we know you're using MySQL and SQLite. What else are you using? Like, what makes Ghost like all the intricacies of like Ghost?
I mean, there's a lot. One of the issues with, as I kind of mentioned earlier, with starting in 2012 was a lot of the tools didn't exist. A lot of the good tools today didn't exist back then. So some of our code base is DIY. Some of it is old packages. Some of it is new packages. Some of them have been fully replaced. Some of them have not been fully replaced. So honestly, our code base after 10 years is a little bit of a patchwork and is in this kind of constant state of evolution to try and get it up to the best standards that we can. But at its core, we already talked about database layer. ORM we use as Bookshelf, which is
in-house.
It's not the best maintained ORM in the world, but there honestly don't seem to be great ORMs to date. I mean, Prisma and Drizzles are the ones that I'm kind of paying attention to these days, but for a long time, ORMs and Node have been a struggle. Then on the client side, for the admin app, we started with BBoJS, but these days we're mostly doing new things in React. But there's still a lot of legacy Ember code base hanging around and empowering the majority of the admin app. On the front end for themes, it's handlebars.js. And what else have we got in there? All our CSS is a mix. I think everything new is Tailwind, but there's probably one or two other atomic CSS frameworks buried in there. And before that, it was SASs and SASS. So what was that? Syntactically awesome style sheets, I think that stood for.
Oh yeah, beautiful name.
Yeah. And then it was SCSS at some point. I can't remember what the differences were in all the preprocessors. Yeah, those are all the big things. And then there's a couple of external third-party dependencies that we have, like Mailgun, Freemail, and Stripe for payments, things like that. Things where we really don't want to do those things.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I sort of like for sales and so we use something called Waterline. It's sort of like first party to sales. It's also like third. You could use it outside if you want. And I feel I've seen a lot of OLMs out there. I don't know. Maybe I am biased, of course, but I feel it's great, especially it's just stable, it just works. And the DSL is JavaScript objects and everything. And it's fairly decent. A lot of people like it. I know like a lot of companies who I speak to and they really like the expressive nature of it and how it works. Because I do know the newer kids on the block, they're really good, I think. But anytime I look at the DS, I'm like, no, I'm not learning that. I thank you. I'm not going to learn all that. I'm just going to stick with this. Yeah. So I've never heard of Bookshelf before. This is fun. I will probably reach out to the folks and see if, but it looks a little bit. So Waterline is also based on Next or Connects, if that's how you say it. So
Yep.
I guess they might be similar in a couple of ways.
Yeah.
They might be similar. Yeah, that's fun. Thank you for sharing that. So
Sure.
yeah, so I'm guessing you're still using Express, right? Because of course that should be your node,
Yeah.
right?
Express still in there.
Oh, cool. You should try Sail sometime. You could hit me up. I could help the migration if you ever want. So yeah, so to round up, so tell me, so top three. So we're in the top three section, which I like. So top three movies, top three books, then top three podcasts to listen to. So let's start with movies.
Wow, this is gonna be a tough one. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to
Oh,
name three of all of these.
really?
Let's see, movies. Shawshank Redemption. That's got to be up there as like one of the old times.
Mm-hmm.
The Big Short and The Wolf of Wall Street. Probably those are like ones I like to go back to.
Nice, awesome.
The last
No
two are very
series at
similar. The
all.
first one's very different.
Yeah,
Series? Did you
yeah. You
say?
don't see no. Yeah, series. You don't see any what like no Netflixing for you.
I do a bit of Netflixing and a bit of YouTubing, but I don't watch a huge number of movies.
Oh, cool. That's cool. Okay, so that means you've not seen Game of Thrones,
I've
Suits.
seen, I think, most of Game of Thrones, like half of Suits. Suits at a certain point,
Okay,
it's just the same story repeating over and over again, I feel like.
that's blasphemy. I love that series.
Oh, shit, sorry.
It's fine. It's fine. It's all good. Okay. All right. So yeah, how about books?
Books. God, let's see. I mean,
It's a lot, right?
there's a lot, and it's like how do you rank them?
Mm.
I mean, a
Like,
recent one that I enjoyed quite a lot was it's called "Escaping the Build Trap." The name of the author is gonna escape me, but it's a book about product development and teams and interacting with the relationship between users and feature requests and how to kind of get teams thinking about the relationship with the users of the product. And it paints this picture of a product development team that are just churning out features, but no one really cares, and how they sort of turn that around, which is not a exact situation we've been in, but there's a lot of interesting and good lessons in there. And then on the more narrative side, I'm a big fan of books that kind of tell the story of business histories for whatever weird reason. So Hatching Twitter is a classic read. It's like Desperate Housewives of Silicon Valley is kind of how I describe it. The story of Twitter is just completely fucking insane. And then I'm Feeling Lucky is a really good book about the origin story of Google from, I think it's the first designer they ever hired. And I think he was like employee number 13 or 16 or something like that. And it tells the story of Google from, old shitty office all the way through to IPO, which is a pretty big shift in beginning and end. And it's fascinating if you're interested in the origins of one of the biggest companies in the world today and how it really started. Those are three really good ones.
Awesome recommendation. I love business history as well. So lots of them really, both in podcasts and in books. I've read a couple, so that's fun. But I haven't read any of the three you've mentioned, so definitely go in my Amazon cart. So yeah. Lastly,
Sure.
Yeah, the podcast. What do you listen to? Or who do you listen to?
I barely listen to podcasts because I don't drive. I don't have a car, so I find that the only time I listen to podcasts is if I rent a car and do a long road trip or something. But otherwise, it just doesn't really fit into my day. But I have one recommendation, which is Darknet Diaries. If you've never heard of that one,
I love that one.
it's fantastic. One of my
Yeah, great
best
storytelling.
things I've listened to. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I could recommend one which has been my obsession, the Founders
Sure.
Podcast. I think you'd love it if you like business
Okay.
stories.
Cool.
Is amazing. Like you love it. All the episodes are top notch on like business people like the Buffett, even people like Tiger Woods is great. So he gets these books, your biography or autobiographies, and then he reads them and then come talk about it. It's always beautiful every episode. You should check it out.
Wow.
Founders. So
All right, I'll
yeah,
have a look.
Founders on Spotify. Yeah, sure. Awesome. So this has been fun. So before we wrap up, like any advice for like builders who wants to like do this? I'm actually asking for me because I have this goal as getting to it's a very moderate goal, 1.2 million a year in actual revenue from my businesses or my ventures. And like any advice for people who want to build like a strict revenue driven business, no VC, bootstrap, like from all your learnings, like what would you say are the most important things? Or what are the combination of things that are gonna make you like, really get to that goal of having a self-sustaining business that is turning revenue, not profit because you're not for profit.
um, there could be so many different answers to this, and I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. But if I could say anything, it would be to deeply understand users, and that you can do that either by being one. I think Taylor and Laravel is a great example of that. He's a user of Laravel, and he has so much great intuition about what developers want. That is what Laravel kind of turns into. Or you can do it by talking to them. You can do it by deeply understanding people, by having conversations with them and figuring it out, and then follow that path. Follow what it is that people really want. The single most common mistake of almost all indie hackers is building stuff that nobody wants. And they have an idea that if only people could already use it, then they might want it, which is never right. That is never the sequence of events. People typically want something first, and then they use it. And there are exceptions to that rule because there are exceptions to every rule. But the chances of you being the exceptions to that rule, royal you, is relatively small. So if I could get anyone to over-index on one thing, it would be figure out what people want, either by being them or by talking to them, and focus all your efforts exclusively on that. And I think that's a pretty reliable, if not fallible, path to business with good revenue.
Awesome. So lastly, anything you're working on personally or at Ghost that you want to plug? Anything else?
No, I got nothing to plug. Check out ghost.org. It's a great publishing platform, and if you want to start a blog or send a newsletter, we're good at those things. If you want to take subscription payments and generate MRR from a newsletter, we're good at that. And find me on Twitter or Threads or wherever else for like whatever the project of the week or other thing that's going on is.
Cool. Are you working on anything else outside Ghost personally?
Oh yeah, I've always got side projects on the go. They range from soldering and home automation to building little side project apps with Laravel to riding motorbikes.
Nice. Awesome. Oh, Laravel, cool. I think I saw one of those Vintas, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Like, how's that going? Is it still launching soon, or is it already out there that I miss it?
It's no, it's not out there yet. I'm still working on it. I got pretty busy the last few months and I had to set it aside for a bit, but I'm hoping to pick it up again soon.
Yeah, awesome. Nope. Yeah, thank you so much, John. This has been phenomenal. Like speaking to you, I've learned a ton. I'm pretty sure the viewers will learn a lot as well. So thank you for being here. It was an honor.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.